Okay, so all I've done here now is opened up Visual Studio 2019 and I've created a new Python project for our Windscreen pseudocode. Now, all I'm going to do is convert the pseudocode straight over into Python code. Now, I will try and put reference to this on the screen so you can see what I'm converting. And you, as a skill for an A-level student, is the ability to transfer your pseudocode into a high-level programming language like Python. So, you'll notice that before we had required width is integer, num screens is integer, width is integer, and over width is integer. Now in Python, you don't have to specify or declare your variables because it is automatically assumed. Now we can assign them a value, like required width could be 0, for example, num screens. So these is basically your initialization. Now it's good practice to do this, but there is absolutely no need. Width is 0, and we had over width, didn't we? Over width, if I can learn to spell, over width is 0. So there's all our variables declared. Now what we do is we talked about getting something into the required width. So you could say required width equals int, because we're using whole numbers. We're expecting an input from the user, and we'd say, what question do you want to ask them? And we'll say enter the required width. Once they've done that, we need to know how many screens that we're going to sample. So num screens, again, we have to cast it to integer. Otherwise, we're going to accept a string in, and we don't want to do that. Enter the number of screens to be sampled. So once that's entered, then I'm going to use a for loop. Now I said for I equals 0, 0 to num screens. However, Python and pseudocode differ slightly here. So what we would probably say is we'd probably say for I in range bracket bracket num screens. We need a colon and we press enter. Now it's good to test this just to make sure that you've got the correct number of loops. Now what I'll do is I'll print out the letter I each time. Because we've not declared or initialized the local variable I, it's going to start at that position and it's going to go up to but not including this number. So let's see what happens. I'll use the test data from the sheet. It'll say required width, so I say 1320. How many screens you want to sample? I'll say 7 screens, and it says 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So here we've got screen 1, screen 2, screen 3, screen 4, screen 5, screen 6, and screen 7. So it does actually loop 7 times, even though it starts from 0. So we need to watch that a little bit later on. So I've got my loop now that loops 7 times, and I need to ask the user to enter the width. So I'll use the same process I used before. Int input, enter the width for screen, comma I, just like in my pseudocode. Now I want to show you how this works. Required width is 1320. Screens to be sampled is 7. And then it just stops. I've got an error. The input expected at most 1 argument, but it got 2. So it's looking inside the bracket here and saying, wait, you give me 2 arguments. You give me the string, and also you give me this variable called I. You can't do that in an input. So what we do instead is we kind of get round this by taking all the text out. And I'm just going to write a print statement, enter the string and use I, and then wait for an input underneath. So this is a little way to get around it, just using a print statement. 1320, 7 screens to be sampled. It says enter width for screen 0. Screen 0, it should really say screen 1. But, you know, I can get away with this and I can just keep putting in the values as per the test data on the sheet. and it stops. So I can easily change these numbers on the end here just by putting a +1 next to the I. So when it happens again, instead of saying 0 this time, it's just going to say 1. Screens to be sampled, 7. And notice how it says enter for screen 1 now. There you go. So that's correct. That looks pretty good. So onwards with my pseudocode. Now I've got the width of each screen in. I can say if the width that you just entered is greater than the required width that the user entered on line number 8, colon and enter, and it should automatically indent for us. We want to print out that we've got an over width windscreen. We need to say which windscreen it was, which is what I keep track of, and then we actually need to output the width as well. After that, we say over width windscreen equals over width windscreen plus 1. And again, notice the difference with pseudocode and Python. We don't need to end our ifs. What does end the if is the indentation that you're using. So I don't need to end my for loop either. I'll unindent myself, and now we need two outputs. So outputs in Python are print statements, and I'll just say total number of screens tested, comma, num screens. Second print statement, num screens minus over width. Can we do that again? So let's have a look then and see if our pseudocode Python conversion has all worked. It's always important to test using data. So never take for granted that your code works, because usually mine doesn't. So let's have a look. So it says there, over width windscreen, so we've got one. There's another over width one. It says 7 screens tested, 5 are satisfactory. These numbers here, so over width windscreen 0 and over width windscreen 3, that's not actually quite right. That should be 1 and 4. So to change that, I just need to go into line 15 and put a +1 next to it. And that's it. That should be us fully completed. So do go back and compare the pseudocode and the actual Python code that we created. And you notice there's not a lot of differences, but there are the subtle ones that tend to catch students out. So hopefully you look at the next video looking at another algorithm focusing on pseudocode to Python conversion. Remember, pseudocode and Python programming is all about practice. So just keep going and you'll be absolutely fine.